1967 was the year where it all started for rock. We had Sgt. Pepper, we had the Velvet Underground and Nico, and we had The Doors' first album.
When I first heard The Doors was a single called Light My Fire, and that would have been in the 60s, probably around 67. My God, I was absolutely impressed. I had never heard anything like it.
I first heard The Doors when I was a teenager, and I think the thing that really attracted me to their music was the organ playing in it, and also the lyrical content of a lot of the songs.
My listening pleasure usually was a lot of psychedelic, drug-related music, and these guys still had that San Francisco essence to them, but it was like a jazz trio with a maniac singer who was very dramatic and poetic.
The first record that really struck a chord with me was the first album, as it did a lot of people.
That wasn't until I bought their first album, which was the first album of The Doors that I bought was in order, and I was just blown away by all the music. It was very interesting music.
The first album was obviously very important and one where they really wanted to make a mark.
A lot of people have said it is one of the best debut records in the history of rock music. My impression is I would put it up there in the top 5 for sure.
It's interesting that they actually recorded it in 2 weeks, and they recorded it with a producer that they hadn't met before, a guy called Paul Rothchild, who produced all but one of their albums. It turned out to be a marriage which Elektra Records made, but it was one that was made in musical heaven.
Light My Fire definitely was the Doors' first big hit.
A catchy tune, instant success for The Doors with this song.
Light My Fire turned out to be a pretty successful single for The Doors and one of the songs they'll always be remembered for. But it wasn't written as a single. They basically came in, created an album and thought about the commercial possibilities afterwards.
Interestingly enough, a lot of people assume Jim Morrison wrote that song, but actually Robbie wrote that song.
When I talked to Krieger about Light My Fire, he said it was the first song that he ever wrote.
They had to do a radio edit of it because the song was way too long for AM radio. And people started hearing it on AM radio. It went way up the charts. And the FM players, all the stations could play the long version.
They didn't care about it fitting on radio, and so they just let it go. And when you listen to it, there's a huge long organ solo and you think, well, this is going to finish at some point, and it doesn't, it carries on. And then when it gets to the end, you think, right, it's going to go back into the chorus, and it doesn't, it then goes to a guitar solo. And there's an equally as long guitar solo. And so it's just this huge trade-off of music, which is, you know, absolutely brilliant. And that's why it may be a long song, but it keeps it interesting.
The song was originally 7 minutes long, but they had to make a single length, get it down to about 3 minutes time, which they cut out the keyboard solo and Robbie Krieger's guitar solo. It
was a real sign of the time type song. It came out and, you know, throughout the year 1967, that was their hit. And a lot of people, when they play stuff about the 60s, they'll play that song because it really encapsulates an era.
The song performed live would go on and on even longer. That was, I think, the highlight of The Doors was their live performance. People didn't really get to see how great they were until they saw them on TV or saw them live. They heard the single, catchy tune, but when they saw them live, true Doors fans loved the fact that Krieger's solo went on or Ray Manzarek's keyboard solo went on as it did on the album.
Fantastic track, bit of Latin in there. And what's great about it, really, I suppose, is they're taking, because they were a Los Angeles band, they must have been hearing quite a lot of South American Latin type music from where Los Angeles is placed in the world, and that was seeping into their style of playing. And it wasn't a particularly popular style at that time. You know, that in that era, bands were playing much more blues-based things, but they weren't scared to introduce a different sort of style. So I really, you know, with Jim's voice, that sort of raw, bluesy voice on top of this Latin-type groove, it was it was exciting. It was a very different type of tune.
Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player, came up with the signature introduction, and John Densmore came up with the beat, the drum beat, and Jim came up with some of the lyrics in conjunction with Robbie Krieger. So it was really a band effort, and one which I think was justly, or is still very much justly associated with them.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah. We chased our pleasures here, dug our treasures there, but can you still recall the time we cried? Break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side.
Break On Through is the first song on the album. Any Doors fan, true Doors fan, will tell you that this is the true essence of the Doors. It was Break On Through that led them to the Doors name.
They figured that they were the doors of perception, which linked the known and the unknown. So breaking on through had a very specific meaning. Break on through to the other side. Go through the doors from the world that you know, the world that you're certain of, to an exciting world of possibilities. So Break On Through, while not perhaps their best known track, was one that was quite significant for them.
I actually played with a band in the early 90s. And live it went down a storm. The crowd used to love it, probably because it was a Doors tune. But one thing that the Doors had that was exciting was they were really good live, and they were exciting live with Jim's performance. And the songs were sort of structured for live performance, I feel, in many ways. And when I used to play it with the band, as I said, it went down a storm. It was good fun to play, simple but very effective.
Oh, yeah!
Break On Through, that was a song that the Doors performed a lot in the bars. And it's got a neat beat to it, very different.
The drummer opens with a slight jazz riff. In comes the keyboards, kind of accenting with the drummer. To make that a little bit thicker, the guitar player mimics the keyboard player. Suddenly the song is starting to swell. It's waiting, and then all of a sudden a strange sound, like a moaning guitar or a moaning bass sound, just kind of goes in and out, kind of just making that sexual throbbing sound. And then the voice, absolutely incredible. What a great way to open an album.
1967, The Doors' debut album, self-titled, starts with a 2.5-minute song called Break On Through. 2.5 minutes of perfection. What a way to introduce side one of a record from the Doors.
That was the one song that Elektra was really pushing as their first single. So the first time that they did a tour up and down the coast here on the West Coast, that was a song they played a lot, and that was a song that they were pushing. And it did get a lot of radio airplay, but it wasn't until Light My Fire came out that's when everyone started taking notice of the Doors. But it's a really good song, and it's a great way to lead off the first album.
Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, tell you we must die. Tell you we must die. Oh, moon of Alabama, we know
The Alabama song was the first of 2 cover songs that they did on the album. It was actually taken from an opera entitled Mahogany.
It was a Brecht and Weill song, and Ray Manzarek had an album of their songs, and I think it just took the imagination, took the attention of Jim Morrison, so he thought he could make something of it, and clearly it became one of their more off-the-wall tracks.
My wife Dorothy had the record, and we used to listen to the record, the original cast recording, and we used to listen to the record all the time, and she said, "Why don't you do the Whiskey Bar?" And Jim said, "Yeah!"
We all loved it, and it had this great kind of German oompa kind of beat, and we adapted it for the Doors.
How many times would people assume the Doors, a psychedelic band from Los Angeles, would be doing this Oompapa song?
This just shows the extent and the range of this band, from straight ahead bar blues to something that's just kind of a little left of center.
I thought, this is too weird. But then I got into it, and I found out about Kurt Weill, and we did it so well, people thought we wrote it, and we had to correct them all the time and say, no, this is from a German opera.
Well, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, if we don't find the next whiskey bar, hell yeah, we must die. Hell yeah, we must die. Hell yeah, I tell ya, we must die.
The inclusion of Alabama Song on the Doors debut record, I think that was at the height of Jim Morrison's wanting people to believe that he was a poet and trying to, through music, show his breadth of knowledge, covering the song.
When you got to Alabama Song on that first Doors record, you got a glimpse into the quirky world of the Doors. Melodically and musically, it was a bit off-kilter.
Alabama Song, for me, I think, is an example of when the Doors could sort of just create like a scene in your mind if you just closed your eyes and listened to it. I've never been to Alabama, but you really felt like you walked into some old saloon with a wooden floor and there's dust all over the place, and you walk up and order your whiskey.
It was a song that Jim Morrison probably could have or should have written, because it talks about going to the whiskey bar. And if we don't get to the whiskey bar, we may die, which was very Jim Morrison, even though it was taken from an opera at the time.
While it wasn't out of the ordinary for the time, a lot of people were experimenting in music with that kind of thing. I just think that it took it to another level for the Doors.
It was really neat. It just showed how diverse they could be, and I think it's still pretty popular today. When you still hear it on FM radio quite a bit, and again, it just showed another side of the Doors that you weren't expecting after listening to the rest of the album. It was very, very different.
Well, all your people trying to sleep out there making with my midnight creep, yeah. Back down, man. Tell me you don't know that little girl. You understand, don't you, darling? Ha ha.
Backdoor Man. Well, the Doors cut their teeth playing in different bars around the Los Angeles area, like the London Fog, and then they got their residency at the Whiskey A Go-Go. But when they first started playing, that was one of the mainstay songs that they would play when they were in the bars. And the freshness of their first album was because they'd been playing those songs for at least a year and a half, almost every night. So when they went in the studio, they just blasted through these songs because they were very, very, very fresh. They knew all these songs inside and out. And Backdoor Man was one that would really get a rise out of the crowd when they were playing it live. So they knew that they had to have that one on their album.
This is the reason why they stayed American, staying true to blues. I think they worked this song onto the album because I believe it was a crowd pleaser.
This was a track where they really got down to their roots. Not perhaps a typical Doors track, but one that I suspect went down rather well in concert.
For me, it is one of my favorite Doors songs. Just partly by Morrison's performance, but you have to give it to Krieger on this one.
Robbie Krieger quickly proved with a song like Backdoor Man that he had a firm footing in the blues and could deliver it both tonally on the guitar and with incredible taste in terms of the notes he chose to use and the way he chose to bend them, unlike a lot of people playing rock and roll.
He's a fireball of electricity, and I think, knowing how much of a blues fan Robbie Krieger was, I think that he had to have a hand in the inclusion of that on the debut record.
I found that song on an album by John Hammond Jr. and it was actually written by Willie Dixon. Most songs were. But John Hammond did this great version of it on his album, and it became one of our favorite songs.
A fantastic song. I'm not quite sure how they got away with it because it's quite a rude song if you listen to the lyrics.
Backdoor Man is about anal intercourse.
This song also, lyrically, had a little bit to do with Jim's life, because I know for a fact that Jim, through many books and through interviews, videos that I've seen, he used the back door.
You may eat your dinner, eat your pork and beans. I eat more chicken than any man ever seen. Yeah!
It's about a guy who eats more chicken than you've ever seen. You men come home and you eat your pork and beans. I'm the backdoor man. You men are gone. I sneak in the back door. I eat more chicken. And it's about a gigolo. It's a Lothario. It's a gigolo. It's a blues gigolo song.
Jim Morrison made it his own. He put a lot of menace into this song. I think the men, when watching him perform, had no idea what he was talking about, but the women in the audience certainly knew what he was talking about.
Yeah. You love me, don't you, baby? I knew you would. Well, climb all over me, baby. Touch me. Come on, play with me. Right.
You could tell by the way Jim sang it that he'd been around the block. You men eat your dinner, eat your pork and beans. I eat more chicken than any man ever seen. So he was singing from experience.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. Of our elaborate plans, of everything that stands. into your eyes again. Can you picture what will be so limitless and free, desperately in need of some stranger's hand in a desperate land? Come on, baby!
The End is one of the Doors' major pieces, 11 minutes or so long on an album, sometimes even longer than that in concert.
The End started out just to be a little love song. Jim and I were over at my parents' house for a couple of weeks because they left town. And we wrote a whole bunch of songs at that time. And the end was just, this is the end, beautiful friend, this is the end, my only friend. And it was just a couple verses, you know. And so we would do it in person, and then all of a sudden it started getting longer and longer.
I think it was the first rock song that was over 10 minutes. So we were kind of proud of breaking the 3-minute barrier.
It was a real showcase, I think, for the band, you know, and when they played it live, they'd often, in their first year or so as a band, would end their shows with The End.
What it encapsulates about the Doors is almost the fact that you can't be quite sure what they're talking about. Is it the end of a relationship? Is it the end of the world? It could be more or less the end of anything, innocence, childhood. You can take it and you can make what you want from it. Obviously, Jim Morrison thinks he knows what it's about, but maybe he's the only one who can say for sure.
There was something really quite unusual about that particular song. It was you can tell the Doors used to jam a lot and used to turn, songs would come out of the jams. And I think Robbie Krieger's, you know, Spanishy, sort of slightly Indian-y influences created the template, the backdrop for this song.
The actual riff is, I think it's kind of in a drop D tune, and it kind of goes... that kind of thing. And it stays on that one, the interesting thing about it is it stays on that one note, really, with just him adding these little touches as well. And it's not until Jim Morrison's vocals come in that the song actually changes chords. So when the vocals come in, it goes from that D to a C, and then back to the D. It's a very straightforward song, but it's just having the atmosphere to play the song, and the way it was produced and the way it was played shows the skill of the band.
In this house, and there was a sound like silverware being dropped on linoleum, and then somebody ran through the room and they said, "Have you seen the accident outside?" And everybody said, "Hey man, have you seen the accident outside?" Have you seen the accident outside? 7 people took a ride. 6 bachelors and their bride. 7 people took a ride.
This is a song that toys with you. This is a song that takes you to a peak and then brings you back down. I'm impressed by the journey this song takes you through.
It was this song that got them their record deal. They were playing the Whiskey A Go-Go, probably the most famous live rock venue in the world, in Los Angeles. And it was the lyrics that made people go and perk up. So it was this song that record executives heard them performing at the Whiskey, where they said, we like this, let's talk to them about a record deal.
Morrison's sort of poetry on the top of it and managing to get the darkness of the era across. They did it so beautifully, and they managed to capture it in the studio, which is quite exceptional. And it really is, even listening to it today, it's a fantastically dark and, you know, unusual piece of music.
It was just sort of a hint of things to come, you know, from Jim Morrison and the things that were inside his head.
It's definitely a good way to end the first album. A very good track.
It's a track that certainly in concert took on huge significance, and I think it's a track that a lot of people will remember the Doors album and the Doors the band for.
Love me 2 times, babe. Love me twice today. Love me 2 times, baby. I'm gone away. Love me 2 times, yeah. One for tomorrow, one just for today. Love me 2 times, I'm gone away. Love me 1 time, babe. Could not speak. 1 time, baby. Yeah, my knees got weak. But love me 2 times, yeah. Last me out through the week. Love me 2 times, I'm gone away.
Strange Days came out in 1967, and it was sort of the Doors' darkest album.
Here's an album that confused me and I enjoyed it. It was surreal. It was psychedelic.
It was almost impossible for the Doors to follow up arguably one of the best debuts in rock history, but I think they did it with Strange Days.
They had a far better studio setup for the second album. They had all of 8-track recording equipment, and they were very keen to make an album that was an advance on their first. Musically, perhaps in a way it was. In other ways, obviously, very few second albums make the impact of the first. But Strange Days wasn't a bad effort.
Love me 1 time, babe. I could not speak. Love me 1 time, baby. Yeah, my knees got weak. But love me 2 times, girl. Last me out through the week. Love me 2 times, I'm gone away.
The song Love Me 2 Times starts with a blues riff, which lots and lots of other bands are using, somehow manages to metamorphosis into a sort of pop cadence for the chorus. And they also, a thing the Doors used to use a lot is what's called crotchet triplets. Bat, 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 against 2, 3. Dat, 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 do, 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 boom, da, do. So they had a shuffle going on, crotchet triplets, blues lick, and sort of the other thing they used to use quite a lot was a sort of slightly odd classical thing, which I think Ray Manzarek used to bring to the band in his keyboard playing. Somehow they'd make all these ingredients work, and this is one of the tracks that's typical of this.
The riff for Love Me 2 Times is based around an E chord, and he's basically using the open strings in between. So, but it's the way he's putting them, it just makes a great riff. So the main riff goes. And what he was doing there was just moving up to like an A major shape. And then it's the the bridge bit, using a lot of 7th chords, so it goes to a D, D7, C7, and what I was doing there was just a run G, D7, which is giving it that ring, C7 and B7, rather than using straight chords, which would have just sounded normal, you know. He's using that, which is, the Doors used a lot of that, you know, I think because of the, to complement the keyboard perhaps, you know.
Love Me Two Times is one of those Doors staples. It has everything. I think the neatest part is that it has a harpsichord solo from Ray Manzarek, throwing in that just what the Doors did. They took what was pretty much a straight-ahead song and they added just a little bit of, you know, obscurity to it, and they throw in a harpsichord solo. Ray Manzarek, who was fantastic on the keys as always, but I think that every member of the band brought something to the Doors music, and that was Ray Manzarek's moment to shine, I believe.
Love Me Two Times is considered a mini masterpiece. This really was a big hit for the band. It had that psychedelic flavor, but also a bit of R&B flavor with a great little driving beat to it, a guaranteed hit for the band. They probably didn't know it when recording it, but as soon as it was heard by the fans and non-fans, it gave the band new fans who heard the song went, this is great, what is it? A definite hit from the get-go.
Love Me Two Times, it's a really good song. I think it's got a lot of really good feel to it. And, you know, it's got some neat keyboarding in there. It's got some neat drum rolls.
The standard way to play a rock and roll shuffle would be da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. And I found myself going, I play it all across the drums.
It's a very good single, you know, in less than 3 minutes, you got a really good song that has lots of power and lots of energy.
When the music's over, when the music's over, yeah. When the music's over, turn out the light, turn out the light, turn out the light.
When the music's over, for me, a fantastic Doors song, one of the best ever, in my opinion.
When the Music's Over starts with a sort of blues riff, sort of dirty blues riff, and develops then into this sort of Jimmy Smith, the organ player's sort of funky-ish groove, and then goes off into another area that only the Doors would take it to.
Ray Manzarek really showing his skills as playing the bass line on his keyboard.
When the Music's Over, it will always be bookended with the end, because it's a similar kind of long, drawn-out piece that could be made into a concert set piece.
Another epic track, not as long as the end, just over 11 minutes long. The end was 11 and a half minutes.
When the Music's Over was one of our killer long songs.
What have they done to the earth? What have they done to our fair sister? Ravaged and plundered, ripped her and bit her, stuck her with knives in the side of the dawn, and tied her with fences and dragged her down.
Jim Morrison would go off on one for minutes at a time. In view of that, perhaps the studio recording would be considered a little bit of a prototype, but it's certainly quite a track for Doors fans, and particularly because the music finished very abruptly, as one that in retrospect is regarded as a bit of a signature tune.
When the music's over, you're dead. That's basically how I think these guys, and Morrison in particular, saw the song.
For the time, and there was a lot of race riots and protest music, this is a great protest song because, as everyone knows, in it Jim Morrison screams, "We want the world and we want it now." You know, dealing with political issues was nothing new for the Doors, but I think this is one of the best examples of how they did it with a great song and a great message.
We want the world and we want it now. Right, Mama?
I think probably a lot of these songs Paul Rothchild's still producing, he'd give them freedom in the studio to jam a little bit and improvise, and these things would come out of it, because it doesn't sound like someone's come to the studio and gone, "Here's the riff, man, let's build a song on it." It sounds like they've just started playing. And Jim Morrison was writing lyrics all the time, whether he was in the studio or not. And so I think he would probably just maybe take a piece of paper that he'd written and start singing, and that a song would then develop out of that would then put into the repertoire. And I feel this is probably one of those songs.
A song, you can only say that it was so full of passion and also very intense.
A great finale for a record. It was to that album perhaps what the end was to the Doors' debut. Elongated, epic, incredible.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange. People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down.
People Are Strange was perhaps the Doors' attempt to recreate the success of Light My Fire, which hadn't been intended as a hit single, but when it was edited down from its longer version, became one. So on each album from then onwards, generally the Doors would try to find something that could come out as a single.
People Are Strange, another good song. That was another Morrison one. I believe it was based on a poem that he'd written.
People Are Strange is another Doors classic. Very intriguing lyrics that probably mean a whole lot today as they did when they were written back in the 60s. People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces are ugly when you're alone. Everyone can relate to some time in their life, maybe Jim more so than others.
You could almost say that he was getting annoyed with the whole idea of being famous and you know, fans coming around and things like that. It seemed like he was sort of poking fun at everybody but the hippies, because people were poking so much fun at the hippies. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I took away from it.
At the time, they were still experimenting, and this goes back to on the debut record with Alabama Song, that they include cabaret and various forms of music, not just rock and blues, but Latin and also Oriental music. But I think that the exploration of cabaret music again on the second record, it would be something that would be a hallmark of the Doors music.
The song People Are Strange is weird. It's got a sort of vaudeville 2/4 beat to it.
The way People Are Strange works is it's basically based around two chords, which are E minor and A. But instead of Robbie Krieger playing it just like, he's doing all these intricate parts in between, so it sounds like this. So it's almost like he's playing the bass as well. And I think that's something to do, obviously, with the fact in the early days they didn't have a bass player as such, so he's trying to fill out everything he can by doing bass runs as well with all those bits in between of playing the guitar. So it's kind of like he's playing two instruments, you know.
The chorus reminds me of a band that was around at the time called the Turtles, and they had a song called So Happy Together. The Turtles ended up joining Frank Zappa, so it's a strange connection there. But yeah, it's a bit like the Kinks as well, this song. So maybe they were listening to the Brit invasion that was happening also, because there was lots of sort of slightly more unusual influences going on there. I think they had the ability as a band to soak up other musical ideas as well, and this is one of those songs.
People Are Strange was a reasonably successful single, and they're perhaps on the poppier side of their music.
Wait until the war is over and we're both a little older. Unknown soldier. Breakfast where the news is read, television, children fed, unborn living, living dead. Bullet strikes the helmet's head, and it's all over for the unknown soldier. It's all over for the unknown soldier.
Waiting for the Sun, the Doors' third album, was probably when a little bit of backlash set in. They had been acclaimed as being fresh, new and different, but by the time of the third album, perhaps the cracks were beginning to show.
It was the Doors' third release, successful with new fans. A lot of people accuse them as making an album targeted towards teeny boppers or the teen movement.
A lot of fans that I have talked to over the years also thought that this was a departure for the Doors. I don't believe that myself.
I think after 2 great albums in a row, Strange Days and the debut, it was almost impossible that they could live up to the bar that had been set and the standard that they had achieved for themselves.
They've been touring for the last 2 years. They haven't had time to sit and write, or to be playing a lot of different things and having the time to write and produce stuff. And a lot of people claim that this was the problem with this album.
Make a grave for the unknown soldier, nestled in your hollow shoulder. Unknown soldier. Breakfast where the news is read, television, children fed. Bullet strikes the helmet's head, and it's all over. War is over. It's all over. War is
Unknown Soldier was typical perhaps of the Doors' third album, inasmuch as people looked at it and said, well, it's rather too closely related to Break On Through to the Other Side. Because they weren't really ringing the changes at this point, people could always look at a song and see, well, maybe it's been done better or earlier on another album.
Unknown Soldier. Wow. There's a stab at the Vietnam War.
The Unknown Soldier, I don't think particularly it was about Vietnam, but it certainly had reference to Vietnam and any other war or anti-war sentiment.
The Unknown Soldier was the first overtly political song Jim wrote, which was not mentioning Vietnam, but, you know, the Unknown Soldier.
At the time, it seemed like the norm. People would come out and they would protest and speak against things. I think the Doors did it in a way that was a little bit subversive. Jim Morrison would provoke people with his lyrics. You know, obviously his references to Jesus and to God, he was baiting the audience, and he basically, I think, wanted them to think for themselves. And Unknown Soldier, it was almost prophetic in a way, because he was using it, an anti-war rant, and blaming the media. And obviously 30 years later, we see what role the media has to play in wars, and I think Jim Morrison was ahead of the game on this one.
Read that! Whoa!
I think the claim to fame with that song was when they performed it live, and Jim would recite the little piece of poetry in the middle bit of the song there. He would actually fall to the ground when the guns were fired. He would fall dead to the stage, and that was pretty effectful at the time.
The song The Unknown Soldier is a bit like a little 3-act musical, a 3-act play. And I think really this song was led by Jim Morrison's idea. I think he probably started singing a melody based around obviously his lyrics, and the rest followed. And where they go from the beginning of the tune to the end of the tune, I think could only come from a band that played a lot together and jammed a lot together. So as I say, it's quite unusual because it is like a little trilogy or a 3-act play. Very unusual little piece.
Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you, let me jump in your game. She's walking down the street, blind to
Hello, I Love You will always be compared with the Kinks All Day and All of the Night because the riff is absolutely identical.
Whether they're fans of the Kinks or maybe they were just ripping off the melody because they liked it.
I think the Doors had a bit of a hard time with that because I think some critics pointed that out.
Basically, it's just two chords, which is A major to G major, repeated back and forth, with a guitar riff that I'll play in a moment. And then what they do to make it a bit more interesting is they stop, and then Robbie Krieger plays using a bottleneck. He plays up and down the guitar neck, and they modulate a semitone up to B flat major, and so then it goes B flat to A flat. And I would imagine that's probably Paul Rothchild's, the producer's idea. And it's a great trick. Even ABBA use it. Anyway, I'll go back to the original key, which is A, and I'll play the lick that Robbie Krieger played. So that's the lick, and then they go into chords after that. Then there's the bottleneck, and then they go up a semitone. Hello, I Love You.
Again, the Doors could be accused of retreading their past. In fact, in this case, they were retreading somebody else's past. But it was the hit single on the album that the Doors and their record company expected to produce each time round.
When the band went in to record this album, they weren't really prepared. And I think a lot of fans noticed this, especially on the song. A catchy number that it is, I think fans kind of thought it wasn't their best effort, and they wrote a lot of the material while they were in the studios, whereas before they really prepared for each and every album. And I think true fans noticed that it wasn't as good as it could be, but they still liked the song.
It's a great song, and it holds up on its own. And I think it was quite popular on the radio at the time, and they would play it live in concert. They played it on the different TV shows at the time. And I think it did them well, and it was a good song to have on that album.
Trade winds find galleons lost in the sea. I know where treasure is waiting for me. Silver and gold in the fountains of Spain. I have to see you again and again. Take me, Spanish caravan.
The song Spanish Caravan, it was great to hear Robbie Krieger playing a bit of Spanish guitar. Obviously, he studied a bit of that. And he even hints a little bit at some Segovia playing there. And he uses what's called a natural minor scale for most of the song. And then when the band come in, even Ray Manzarek hints at some of, I think, his solo from Light My Fire. It reintroduces that into this song. So, you know, it's as if they would take elements of their own material and put them back into other songs, which is great in a sense, because it's always like a little tip of the hat to something they'd done before.
Spanish Caravan is actually a really great song, very cool song. It starts off with this folky kind of style, and in true Doors fashion, it really starts to electrify. Maybe you can compare it to a folk band like the Byrds or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. But the way it starts surprises everyone, and then all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, it's the Doors, because it finally electrifies.
Spanish Caravan was pilloried by, I think it was the LA Free Press, as being perhaps the worst lyric of any rock song they'd ever heard. So I think everyone was aware by the time that Waiting for the Sun had been issued and reviewed, and generally in a downbeat fashion, that something was going to have to change. So the Doors saw that and they made the changes.